This is a good starting point because it is a good summary of all the exponential technologies and the advances in science that we heard about in the last 24 hours. And yet, healthcare begins and ends with each and every one of us. Healthcare is deeply personal. And in that line of thinking, I want to begin my talk by telling you about my exes. Yes, this is the part where you need to start paying attention. I know lunch is hitting right about now, but we are about to take things to a personal level, and we're about to make things very interesting. My talk is about Health 4.0, and as I said, it starts with a personal experience around my 3 X's. I think very fondly about my 3 X's. They have impacted my personal life, and they've impacted the way I think about innovation, the way I think about health, the way I think about my role in transforming one of the largest health benefits companies in the US. My first X has to do with my experience as a patient. Over 2.5 years ago, in a cold January morning, I was rushing to the airport, trying to catch a flight to go to Singapore when I needed to squeeze in a routine doctor appointment. I made it to the doctor's office. While palpating my abdomen, the physician had this bewildered look on his face, and he said, "Mariya, why don't you hang tight for a little bit? Let's get some more tests done." So we got some blood work, we got some CT scans. Needless to say, I missed that flight that day, and I left the hospital with no answers. The next day, the answers came, and so did the verdict. The radiology report showed a large, highly vascular mass that was taking up the entire right-hand side of my abdomen. The dimensions of that mass were 36 centimeters by 18 by 16. For the visual minds in the room, think of football. For the European minds in the room, think rugby, not soccer. But that Tuesday morning, 2.5 years ago, I woke up with a realization that they have a large angiomyolipoma connected to my right kidney. The odds were not looking very good because typically anything that is larger than 3 centimeters in size, literature recommends to be resected or embolized. In my case, at 36 centimeters in size, the odds were not looking very good to remove that tumor safely without taking my kidney with it or bleeding out on the surgical table. So with that mindset, my first reaction was denial, disbelief. I was fully asymptomatic. I had a global role, I was traveling around the world, and I still couldn't understand how come we missed it? Why did this happen? None of my physicians could give me the answers. Even more frustratingly, they couldn't even tell me what to do about it. How do we fix this? So my frustration, the questions that I couldn't get answered, turned into curiosity. I started looking for answers at places outside of my physician's office, outside of the field of medicine. The curious mind, as I found out, is the best problem-solving tool we have as humans. I know Plamen Petrov and Plamen Rusev and others will disagree, but the human curious mind will take on AI any day because curiosity is the best antidote against fear and self-destruction. So with that curious mindset, I started learning about my tumor. I got to know my tumor. I befriended my tumor, yes, I named my tumor. That football-sized tumor became Bertha to me. Bertha was very special, not only because of her size, but because of the way she had adjusted and integrated with the rest of my organs so that I was fully functional at a fairly high level. She had gently displaced all the organs in an almost respectful way. So with that curious mindset, I started asking questions and reaching out to friends and soon-to-be friends to understand what are the reasons and how can we actually creatively come up with a solution where birthday is safely removed and I get to keep both my kidneys. That journey, the dot connecting across different disciplines and experts, was a long-winded and non-linear one. So in one of my conversations with one of my closest friends, Shafi, we came up with the idea that perhaps it would be a good idea to know if birthday is touching the neighboring organs or connected with them. So he called a friend, his friend called a friend, the friend called another friend, and soon enough we had a data scientist, a 3D modeling expert, a computer scientist, a physician, a radiologist. They all came together to give us a view of this. What you see here, that tiny little brown dot connected to the green, is my kidney. The blue mass is Bertha. So as you see, she is impressive, as physicians would say, but we were able to discover that she was actually touching the organs. There were probably no actual connection there, and if we were to go in and resect it, it was possible to resect her without taking the tumor with it. There were ways we could actually do this and reduce the risk of bleeding. And so I very quickly started becoming an expert into Bertha, into the surgical processes that might work, and frankly, more importantly, an expert into me. What would work for me? How do we do this in a way that I'm comfortable? How do we do this in a way that protects me and my family and the people who are caring about me during, post, and after surgery? That experience, that third X, and the combination of those three X's for me are what informs my mindset around healthcare and my role as I'm helping transform one of the largest health benefits companies in the US. Let me give you 2 cents on innovation. Innovation for me boils down into 2 pragmatic things. We are at Webit, so the first thing very aptly is the 10X mindset. When you think about change, when you think about innovation, don't think about 10%, don't stay in the comfortable incremental. Think large scale, think moonshot, think 10X, because this is where you unlock the creative capacity of your potential. The second piece is first principle thinking. Everybody reasons by analog, the Me Too approach. Very few leaders or unicorns reason by coming down to the most fundamental principles of what we know and questioning the assumptions that we've taken for granted. Anyone from Aristotle to Henry Ford to Elon Musk to Jeff Bezos, these are leaders, first principle thinkers who questioned what the common sense or common belief was when it comes to better transportation, horses versus cars, better electric batteries, the cost of electric batteries, questioning the assumption that no one would want to read a book online, or the publishing industry is not going to accept electronic or self-publishing. These are the first principle thinkers who flipped a mindset on its head and designed a solution from scratch. And so when you think about healthcare and insurance, those 2 principles, the 10X mindsets and the first principle thinking, are the 2 levers that we need to use to turn healthcare around with that personal patient view in mind. Let me tell you how these 3 X's apply to healthcare, or specifically insurance. In its identity, the experience where insurance comes from is actually in the 17th century. Lloyd's was the first company that underwrote a risk, the risk of the ships going out at sea and coming back with the value of the goods. So they underwrote the value of the goods coming back from the ships. The Catholic Church took that to a whole new level and came up with the first actuarial table where they were insuring lives. Now today, when you think about insurance, the business model hasn't really changed that much. Insurance companies typically are in the business of identifying the probability of an event happening, pricing that event, and turning it into a steady work stream of revenue. Today, a handful of brave thinkers, first principle thinkers, are flipping that model on its head. When you think about forest fires, typically you insure against the fire. In very few cases, some companies are looking to actually deploy drones, sensors, and artificial intelligence to predict and prevent the fire from happening. So when you think about that model of insurance, when you now become in the business of preventing the event rather than pricing it, very exciting things start happening in healthcare. Let me show you how that looks like when we couple it with some of the exponential technologies we saw today. So that mindset with the exponential technologies plus the business models we're seeing is really going to give us the future that you saw with the video at the beginning and Sarah. That exposure gives us a completely different skill set or secret sauce when it comes to what insurance companies in healthcare should do. We're no longer in the business of preventing adverse pricing events and helping you when you're sick. We're now in the business of anticipating what you would need and making the call on your behalf. We're in the business of wellness, emotional, financial, mental, and we're in the business of delighting our customers. One of the ways we're doing that, I'll give you an example, we completely flipped on its head the notion that we need to wait until our members call us to take the call and solve their issue. We have a vast database with brilliant, smart people who came up with the algorithm who could actually predict with high probability who is likely to call us in the next 45 days and for what reason. Frankly, it's not that difficult. If we denied your claim, you call us. That's common sense, right? With that in mind, we now proactively reach out to you and say, hi, we know you're likely to have a question. Let us help you with it before you make that call. That's the mindset that we take when it comes to the evolution of healthcare. I believe that as industry, we're moving from a place where we are reactive, incrementally layering in technologies on top of broken systems, to a place where we have no other choice but to think system change. And systemic change, business model change, organizational change cannot happen unless we're thinking about that intersection of the three axes. With that in mind, I believe that we're headed not for healthcare 2.0 or 3.0, but really health X.0. Because otherwise, we're stuck in constantly chasing that next iteration of the software, that next iteration of the technology, chasing the next shiny new toy. Here's how we're doing this at Anthem. We all know that there's a myriad of data around us. The 90% of the world's data was generated in the last 2 years, and by 2020, the data that we'll have generated is 50x the data we had in 2010. The challenge we're seeing is that those data are comfortably siloed in different parts that don't necessarily talk to each other in a system that was designed to manage risk and prevent adverse complications rather than unlock insights. So we believe that technologies like blockchain are very well suited to help us solve some of those fundamental infrastructure challenges when it comes to data. We're looking at deploying blockchain solutions in areas where the problems are so painful for so many parties that collaborating with each other to solve them actually makes sense. Things like, as we saw, identity management for patients, patient's consent. How many forms does a patient need to sign before we actually are able to release the data to their physician or to the person in their care team? Things like coordination of benefits. When patients have multiple insurance on the government side or private side, how do we know what procedure is covered by what? Examples like provider directories. Databases that are being maintained by multiple parties in the ecosystem that everybody has to invest in maintaining them. without actually sharing that data. These are problems that don't represent a competitive advantage for neither of the members in the system, yet they're exceptionally painful and cause a lot of problems for our members. The other thing we look at is, now that we've started laid the foundation of how that data gets connected, now we're looking, how do we unlock the insights in that data? And this is where we need you, your brilliant minds, to come help us mine the data for the insights that are so obvious, yet so deeply hidden. What we've done is we've opened up the first free de-identified data set for private healthcare data. As Plamen mentioned earlier, we take care of about 80 million members and their families. So we've opened up a data set of 80 million members longitudinally over 12 years with data around pharmacy, data around their claims or labs. And we're looking to partner with the right researchers and companies to help us connect the dots, help us identify areas where we might be able to see if somebody's likely to get diabetes or somebody's likely to have an opioid addiction before they get there. The next step in terms of that vision, and when you think first principle and 10x, the next step is to invite others who have data sets that are equally interesting and relevant in personalizing and predicting our health. The retail companies, the financial services companies, everything that encompasses our health, our lifestyle. Because remember, we're now in the business of keeping you healthy. With that in mind, we're also looking to structure minimal viable ecosystems. Who are the partners that we need to bring together to A, lay down that foundation and infrastructure, and B, open up the insights that we need to implement large scale? With our friends from IBM, I don't know if they're here, we've started a blockchain consortium, the Health Utility Network. And that blockchain consortium is actually very unique because it's inclusive, not only for healthcare companies, but we're also bringing in financial services companies that allow us to learn from the way they handle large volumes of transactions, highly complex, highly sensitive data, and the way healthcare should be handling large volumes of transactions in highly complex, highly sensitive data environments. And finally, now that we've connected the dots, the real question is, could we connect the clinical data with the non-clinical data? We're looking at ways sensing could become ambient. We're looking at ways we can turn your Wi-Fi network into an ambient sensing system that allows us to track respiratory rate, heart rate, mobility, etc. And so for patients who are comorbid, homebound, exceptionally prone to adverse effects, that is a life-changing way to connect their care outside of the clinical setting and anticipate what they might need. So when we layer sensing on top of those insights, this is where things become very interesting for one single reason, because it allows us to bring it all back to, maybe not. Guys, can you move my next slide? Maybe? Me. Or you in that case. The reason we're doing all of these things is because fundamentally it allows us to get better at knowing you. My personal journey taught me one thing. It is damn difficult to dot connect. It's damn difficult to dot connect by yourself. And so I'm on a mission to make that dot connecting commonplace and default for all our members. The way we do that, let me tell you where the story ended. I connected the dots. We came up with a creative way to structure a 6-hour surgery preceded by a procedure called embolization that allowed 4 highly skilled cross-disciplinary surgeons to come in and resect Bertha. I got a beautiful scar And Bertha got a farewell party. Now, with that in mind, I started from a very personal place, gave you my view of my 3 X's and how they inform my view of insurance and my view of what we need to do as an insurance company in the US business. The question to you is, what is your X? Don't you dare get settled for the incremental. And my invitation to you is to come join us. Either in our data sandbox, experiment, learn from the insights, or as some of our toughest critics. We do want to hear it, because that's the way we change healthcare, one person at a time. If you get my last slide, you'll see how you could do this. There you go. And with that, guys, can somebody exponentially fix this thing? All right, as you can see, I'm a very patient person. With that, thank you.